I've been through a few characters in my time playing, albeit not for any large amount of time. My most played is Fox, and the only other serious secondary or main for some time would be Falco. I also love playing a bunch of different characters in friendlies depending on how I'm feeling. I find it very fun to experiment with new tools and also see a matchup from a different perspective. For some, I think it's quite daunting to learn a new character or even completely switch. I figured I would give you my recommended process for learning your character along with some tips. The last few weeks or so, I actually dropped my current main and decided on Yoshi. So I'm not playing competitively, but I wanted to have a character I could slowly learn in friendlies. I'll be using him as my main example in this video, however I'm not actually going through with my own process in this one just because of the effort required, as I'm not interested in the game that way. I just play when I feel like it. That brings me to a good point though, which is how much time are you willing to commit? So you have your character picked and you're wondering where to go from here. I think it's important to first get an idea of how much time you're willing to commit. Is this a complete main switch or a fun secondary? Do you even play melee that much in the first place, etc. This is important because progress is different when you learn a new character. It's like starting from square one again, and I find that people don't realise that sometimes. If you don't have a plan in place of what you're willing to put in according to your goal, you might skew your skill perception. So define your goal with the character and the time you're going to use, and we can move on from there. Now that that's out the way, we can move on to the main topics. I think the importance of these topics could change depending on your skill level. For example, we could start with execution. Execution is incredibly important to have down from the get-go in melee. However, it will be less important for someone who has gone through the process for another character or has been playing the game for some time. Regardless of skill level though, I would still begin with this, making sure you can control your character and have all the required melee tech down before moving on to character specific. Once it gets to the character specific level, then you can begin to do your research, because if you don't have that knowledge, then you don't know what to practice other than that basic melee stuff. Unless you're in practice mode forever, you probably won't feel comfortable in a real game. This is why you should seek friendlies whenever possible to get to a basic comfort level. Once the moves don't feel alien to you and you aren't required to think about it, I think that's when you should stop playing friendlies and move on to improving your knowledge. I feel the most comfortable way to go about this process is by constantly self-evaluating your progress. You should begin by learning character-specific concepts and then attempting to apply them in game. If you can't apply them or you see holes in your game, you can choose whether or not you need more experimentation, knowledge, or execution. The skill is incredibly important and overlooked, I feel, for improving as a player. If you continually misplace where you're at, your progress will be slow. It also breaks up the monotony of improving. It's not always the same thing and you'll feel more satisfied with it too. Advanced execution is required when you start to become familiar with which tactics you want to use, and therefore need to be more precise to harness those. It might begin with something simple like, I want to learn X styles because they're cool, and then it might eventually develop into a fully fleshed out practice schedule because you don't want to mess up anything. I think execution is the fastest way to go from a beginner to intermediate player level, but not necessarily the best way. It usually gives you a strong punish game, so whenever you do get hit neutral, you'll kill most players, or at least get a good amount of percent. I still think this is a good method, although it's not the way I went about things. Trying to juggle everything at once can be quite difficult, and dedicating a lot of time to execution can be quite boring for some. I would say use that self-evaluation skill we were mentioning before, but perhaps weight a little heavier in this execution thing if you're newer. Once you get the ins and outs of your character figured out, some basic knowledge, punish game, general execution, then you can begin to look at some matchups. I think breaking down your improvement via matchups to be very potent, even still at my current level. A lot of things you learn in one matchup can be applied to many others, and it also gives you a kind of focused choice of things to work on. This naturally comes to me through doing poorly against certain characters, and decided I wanted to come up with some strategies to beat them. I'll provide a document in the description for a handy way that I go about deciding matchups for myself. It's a template you can use and edit. Mentality is an under-discussed topic, especially in the context of learning a new character. Switching your main, for example, has a lot of potential pitfalls that you may have to overcome. maybe even before switching to the character, just when you're considering it. Just like we commit our time to the game, we must commit ourselves to the character. Most people will tell you when talking about playing competitive melee is stick to one character. You will divide your time up too much. Same thing goes here. Remember what your ex Kirby did to you? Don't fall for him again. Him, her, I don't know. Stick with your new Behemoth. Point being here is if you constantly switch between back to your old and new character, you will waste a lot of time. And it will also constantly be a mental deficit in your games if you're not confident in your character. There's also the players who switch without a great reason, or without even considering it very much in the first place. If your reason for switching is linked to a lack of skill, a lack of knowledge, failure in execution, or all of the above, you probably shouldn't switch character, at least without some serious consideration. If you've been maining Game & Watch for the past year, I can see the issue, but maybe not so much if you're playing a top tier. Switching main shouldn't be a spontaneous or emotional decision. Let the dust settle before making it. There's a lot more to consider when making a switch, but I think I'll leave that for another time. We talked about knowledge earlier. How do we even begin to gain this knowledge? Luckily in 2018 we have so many resources for this game, it's insane. It's just about utilising them to their fullest potential. The first main one would be character discards. There's loads of people that are crazy about the character you want to learn. Just go on Smash Cards to find them and start interacting. You'll learn really fast here. They usually have it all neat and structured into sections to accommodate all your needs for learning. There's also the melee library, which I highly recommend. There's so much info in here I've not even read. If there's something specific you're looking for, you can filter it by its table contents to find a wide array of melee based knowledge you can use for yourself. 20XX is a must have. The newest version is so polished and it has many sick features you should really be utilising for your learning and practice. Dedicate some time to learning how this works and downloading it, and trust me, it will greatly increase the efficiency of many improvement based tests. The last thing I would like to talk about is Theorycrafting. I think this is quite similar to the matchup section except on a more general scale. You can either take a creative or logical approach to this, but overall your main goal should be to develop tactics and strategies for your character. What do you think is a good playstyle for this character, and what is one that fits well for you? This sort of stuff comes better with experience, but it really doesn't hurt to try. A good way to improve on this is to ask why a lot. Choosing to question things will get the ball rolling and start a thought process. You can question literally anything. Why is Yoshi's head so fucking huge? How can I play this situation better?
Why is Mr. Burns being so nice to me?
And if you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours.
Wait a minute, is he coming on to me?
I mean, if I should slip something into your pocket, what's the harm?
Oh my god, he is coming on to me.
After all, negotiations make strange bedfellows.
Of course, the more specific and thought-provoking, the more effective. I would also highly recommend, if you want to get really good at this game, to think about melee situations in your head. Also, a lot. I would have tended to do this during travel just when I'm not doing very much. An effective way to train this is to do match analysis. Now that's a story for another time, but I also have another handy guide in the description I'm sure you can make use of. So that's a somewhat brief introduction to what learning a character is like in Melee. It's hard to keep this concise without delving in a bit too deep. However, I plan to do something in the upcoming guide I'm writing, the Melee Handbook, or at least that's what I'm thinking of calling it. I'll be covering as many topics as I can from my experience playing the game and explaining how to reach a similar level to myself. Keep up to date with it by following me on Twitter. Finally, thanks for watching and I hope this helped. Let me know what you thought in the comments, and how do you go about learning a new character?